So here we are then with episode 2, which sees us switching up from murderous Atlantean warriors residing in the depths of the North Sea to a demonic cryptid dwelling in occupied France. And it's that sort of variety that I want to look to maintain with this. I don't want each episode to turn into a creature feature of the week. So what I'm going to be trying to do is to make sure that there's enough genuine difference in the material in each episode to try and keep things fresh. In terms of the monster this week, I have to heap all of the praise over to our art team, which is Sad Astronaut Designs. When I wrote this script, in my head I had something in mind halfway between a pterodactyl and an alleged cryptid called the Van Meter Visitor, which was a sort of flying lizard that terrorised the residents of an Iowan town in October of 1903. I say alleged. The only real stipulation that I gave when I sent the art brief off was that I wanted it to be a flying monster with no eyes, with holes where the eyes should be. And the design that came back is entirely up to the art guys. That nightmarish face, mouth full of teeth, and some intriguing jawline protrusions are like something straight out of a Guillermo del Toro project. And frankly, I love it. What he's managed to come up with is every bit as memorable as the work he put in on episode 1. I know in my head what I've got lined up for him, and I am massively excited to see where he takes this with our future episodes. In terms of the story this week, there's no set inspiration for where it came from. In general terms, when the Ray Stevenson movie Outpost came out in 2008, I was a fairly big fan of that. And despite the fact that in the short term, all it did was spawn a whole genre of really awful Nazi zombie and Nazi monster movies, that practical idea of taking a horror movie, the DNA of a horror movie, and enshrining it in World War II really struck with me. And that's really the sort of birth of this project, to be truthful. Specifically, the raid on the Renault factory is exactly as it's described. The facility was based at, and pardon the pronunciation, Boulogne-Billancourt, to the west of Paris city centre. At the time of the raid, it was producing an estimated 18,000 lorries a year for the occupying German forces. And then on March 3rd, 1942, a force of 235 RAF bombers took 2 hours to reduce it to rubble. The raid itself was lauded as a massive success, but it came with a high cost. The majority of the workers and their families at the plant lived in apartments either on the complex or near to it, and there were hundreds of casualties. There were a further 2 bombing raids on it during the war by the American Air Force, but the factory itself did survive the war and stayed operational till it was closed by Renault in 1992. Vigny is a real place. It wasn't ever bombed during the war, from what I can tell from the research. To be honest, I just picked it off a Google map because it would have been a longer flight path that the bombers would have taken for the Renault raid. Apparently there is quite a nice chateau there, but I have to confess, my research into the town has been very minimal. Other than to look for a name for it, it is entirely fictional. The Fallschirmjäger were one of Germany's most elite fighting units during World War II. They were highly motivated, inspirational, and improvisational soldiers who used their wits and their training to overcome odds that other units would have seemed impossible. In the early years of the war, they achieved stunning victories in the likes of Norway and Holland and Belgium. Unfortunately, as Germany opened up more and more fronts, it became harder and harder to deploy them and to supply them effectively. They had further victories in Crete and in Russia, but it became clearer and clearer that despite the fact they were being dropped on or behind enemy lines, they couldn't relieve them quick enough. After that, realistically, they became the go-to guys for valiant rearguard actions. Their battle honours are impressive, the likes of Monte Cassino, Brest and the Falaise Pocket, but there's a common theme. They were dropped in quickly to try and stave off a quick victory, and they did what they were supposed to do, but it cost them high casualties. In terms of Sergeant Linz, if he's based on anybody, it's the character of Kurt Steiner from The Eagle Has Landed. Putting Michael Caine's very dodgy German accent to one side and the fact that he was an officer in that rather than NCO, what you've got is a professional soldier with a strong conscience and an unbending loyalty to his men. And I don't want to spoil anything, but what I would say is don't be surprised if you happen to see him coming up in some of the future episodes.